Now we're going to get into some climate change news.
Yes. So I found this awesome article on Reuters about how a transformer shortage is getting in the way of the green transition right now. So transformers are electrical components which raise or lower the voltage output of generators to meet demand. So they're a really important component. You can't really make the generator without them, because otherwise you're going to waste a ton of electricity, or you're not going to be able to output enough of it, right? So right now there's a huge shortage, and it's for a couple of reasons. One is kind of obvious. There's increased demand from the Inflation Reduction Act subsidies and similar legislation in other countries for more green infrastructure, right? So there's a lot of demand, but there's also a problem with supply, because supply of basic materials for transformers, of the source materials, is quite restricted, and often it's isolated to certain countries. For a long time, the US, we have imported cheap electrical steel, which is the main component. Electrical steel goes into these transformers from Japan, South Korea, and China, okay? But there are reasons that these countries can't really scale up or don't want to. One is that domestic demand is lower, right? They're ahead of us, or they're just not as big of economies, so they don't need to source their own projects as extremely as we do. And in China specifically, it's made efforts to reduce its steel production because the process heavily pollutes its air. It's kind of a paradoxical thing where we want the steel to help in our green transition, but the process to make the steel is still polluting as it is right now. And so since the pandemic, there have been multiple factories in China that have shut down, and supply has been constricted that way. There's only one electric steel manufacturer in the US. And in the spring, they told the Biden administration that scaling up to produce enough of this steel to support the industry would be really difficult. They also have asked for tariffs on electric steel because they say that foreign producers dump steel onto not only the US market, but into Canada and Mexico at prices, because they can more easily trade into the US, at prices that the US can't really compete with, that this US manufacturer can't compete with.
Oh man, that really puts that puts my position on tariffs to the test, because I've always said
Yep.
that I do not support tariffs, especially on items that are inputs
Yep.
to other means. And I have your next. I can see your next bullet point here.
Yeah.
And it makes perfect sense.
Exactly, because the manufacturers who are buying this steel, the companies that are making these transformers and other equipment and infrastructure for the green transition, they are totally against those tariffs, right? Because they think that they're going to drive the prices even higher. But it's this really weird tension, because for really, I would argue, for national security goals, we do need to be able to make our own electrical steel, right? It's going to be so important to maintain these transformers and to know that we can produce them at scale when we need them, especially as climate change is going to be ramping up the intensity of natural disasters, which keep destroying all of this infrastructure out there.
That's true.
So it's a really weird, it's a hard tension to hold and kind of come to terms with.
Well, because it's going to reduce, if we put tariffs on, I would assume that this means that we're going to have less electrical steel on our market for 5 years while these companies upscale.
Yeah.
And to produce more of the steel, which I don't think the transformers companies could deal with. And I don't think that I think that weakens our green transition more than it benefits it.
I agree. I don't think we can afford it. Right now, it makes no sense to do the tariffs, because even this one US company has said, we have to operate at full capacity constantly because of how big demand is. Demand, let me just say, so in the past year, delivery time for transformers has increased from 50 weeks to 150 weeks. That's 3 years. This used to be a 4-week turnaround time. This demand increase is unprecedented. It's crazy. So yeah, the US manufacturer isn't really worried about being able to sell at whatever prices it wants to right now. certain developers have stockpiled transformers in advance because they foresaw this issue, but then the ones that didn't are just taking the hits.
They're just getting screwed.
They're getting absolutely screwed. So the good news here is that battery capacity is still projected to double for each of the next 2 years, which is wild. Like,
that is
all
insane.
of our battery capacity. It's going to double in 24 and then double again in 25. Isn't that wild?
Wait a second. What?
Yeah, that's what's projected. It's something like 8,800 megawatts is what we have installed right now.
Okay.
And the idea is next year we're going to install like 9,000.
Wow.
And then by the end of 25, we'll have around 30,000 installed.
Holy crap.
Yes. So I think overall, this is a hiccup, right? This is a supply chain issue where there's going to need to be scaling up, but I think there can be. I think there's enough material to scale up because it's still relatively high. It's early on in the supply chain, right?
Right.
So we can start making more steel. We can ramp that up. If we're making more steel, then we can ramp up the production of transformers. Transformers are really old technology, so that's not hard to get going. It's just this is slowing us down right now. And I think I would point out that generally, this is a good sign in that demand is so high.
That is very true.
Right.
We are seeing a shift. We are seeing a lot of investment into our infrastructure, right? That is a really good sign.
Totally.
Now, when you said battery capacity is projected to double for each of the next 2 years, right? Did that mean that the overall amount of batteries being used in the economy is set to double? Or do you mean that the capacity of each battery is going to double?
Oh, no, not of each battery.
Okay.
It's like total battery storage. I mean, it's not like the double A's.
No, I know.
Yeah.
But like so you're not saying car batteries will become twice as more efficient.
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay. That's how I originally interpreted it. But okay. So you're saying that the number of batteries in the US economy is going to grow that exponentially fast.
Maybe it's both. Like maybe it's both. Like I'm not sure it's number of batteries because maybe it's bigger batteries.
Oh, maybe it's sure.
Right? Like it's just that our energy storage capacity from batteries will be doubling each of the next 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do we know if that's continued to grow after those 2 years? Do we know that yet? Or?
I don't know.
Okay. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so it is. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully there will be more news later on.
Yeah, that's
to
crazy.
update that.